You do not belong in this restaurant, and neither does your apology. So take both of them back to whatever hole you crawled out of before I have security remove you, like the trash you clearly are." The words sliced through the Sunday brunch crowd at La Maison Dorée like a blade through butter, and 37 heads turned toward table 14, where Brittany Ashford Wells stands with her Hermes Birkin bag clutched against her chest, manicured finger pointed at the trembling elderly woman in the server's uniform who has just accidentally spilled 3 drops of water on the tablecloth. 3 drops, counted, photographed. Already being composed into the complaint that will end this woman's career if Brittany has her way, and she always has her way, because she is the daughter of Marcus Ashford Wells, founder of Ashford Capital Partners, her net worth $2.3 billion, and she has never in her 24 years on this earth heard the word no without immediately turning it into a yes through the application of money, influence, or the particular brand of cruelty that wealthy people learn to wield before they learn to walk. But what Brittany does not know, what no one in this restaurant knows, except for the quiet 17-year-old black girl sitting alone at table 8 with a cup of chamomile tea and an untouched croissant, is that in approximately 18 minutes, everything Brittany Ashford Wells believes about power and position and who belongs where is going to shatter into 1,000 pieces, and she is going to wish, more than she has ever wished, for anything in her life. That she had simply smiled and said it was nothing when those 3 drops of water touched the $200 linen tablecloth. The girl at table 8 watches. The girl at table 8 remembers. The girl at table 8 knows exactly who that elderly server is, because that elderly server wiped her tears and told her stories and held her hand at a funeral 6 years ago when the girl was 11 and the world had ended and begun again in the same terrible breath. The girl's name is Maya Coleman. She is 5 feet 4 inches tall. She weighs 118 pounds. She is wearing a second-hand dress from Goodwill, earrings her grandmother gave her, and shoes that were on clearance at Target because the seam was coming undone, and Maya knows how to fix seams because her grandmother taught her that too. Washed along with so many other things that the woman screaming across the restaurant will never understand. Maya takes a sip of her chamomile tea. It has gone cold, but she drinks it anyway, because waste is something she was taught never to tolerate. She watches Brittany's face contort with the particular rage of the inconvenienced wealthy, that specific fury that comes from encountering any friction in a life designed to be frictionless. And Maya thinks about her grandmother, who is at home right now, in the small apartment above the dry cleaners on Maple Street, probably watching her Sunday morning cooking shows, probably not knowing that the empire she built with her own 2 hands 62 years ago is about to crack open in ways none of them expected. 6 months ago, Maya's life was different. 6 months ago, she was just a junior at Westbrook High School, just a girl who got straight A's and worked weekends at her grandmother's catering business and dreamed about medical school because her mother, who died when Maya was 11, had dreamed about medical school too before the cancer came, and the insurance denied the treatment, and the hospital sent them home with pamphlets about palliative care instead of hope. 6 months ago, Maya did not know that her grandmother, Josephine Coleman, had once owned this restaurant. She did not know that 62 years ago, her grandmother had opened the first integrated fine dining establishment in the city, had weathered death threats and broken windows, and a firebombing that left scars on her hands that she always said were from a kitchen accident. She did not know that her grandmother had sold the restaurant in 1987 to pay for her daughter's cancer treatment, the treatment that bought them 8 more years. 8 more years of birthday cakes and bedtime stories, and a little girl named Maya who would carry everything forward. She did not know any of this until the letter arrived. The letter from the law office of Harrison and Associates, informing Josephine Coleman that under the terms of the original sale agreement, the current owners had violated the preservation clause, the clause that required them to maintain the original recipes, the original artwork, the original values of the establishment, and that Josephine Coleman, should she wish to exercise the option, could reclaim ownership of La Maison Dorée for the sum of $1. $1. While 62 years of pain and memory and hope reduced to a single dollar because the current owners had done what the current owners always do, which is to forget where things come from, to strip away the history, to hang new art and change the recipes and pretend that the foundation does not matter. Maya's grandmother had not wanted to exercise the option. She is 79 years old. She is tired. She said the restaurant belonged to another life, another version of herself, a woman she barely remembers being. But then Maya found the photographs in the shoebox at the back of her grandmother's closet, the ones showing a young Josephine standing in front of La Maison Dorée on opening day, 1962, wearing a dress she had sewn herself, standing next to a white woman in a similar dress. On both of them smiling at the camera with the particular defiance of people who know exactly what they are doing and why it matters. The white woman was Eleanor Ashford, Marcus Ashford Wells' grandmother, the co-founder of the restaurant, the one whose name was put on the lease because in 1962, a black woman's name on a lease in this city was a guarantee of rejection. The silent partner, the ally who had been written out of history by her own grandson when he purchased the restaurant in 2019 and erased every trace of its founding, hanging oil paintings of European countryside instead of the photographs of two women changing the world one meal at a time. Maya had shown her grandmother the photographs. Her grandmother had cried. And then her grandmother had done what she had done 62 years ago when the men came with their torches and their hate. What she had done when the doctors said there was nothing more to be done for her daughter. What she had done every single time the world told her she did not belong. She had straightened her spine, wiped her tears, and made a plan. That was 6 months ago. Today, Maya is here to observe. She is here because in 4 days, the legal transfer will be complete. In 4 days, Josephine Coleman will once again own La Maison Dorée, and the staff, who were never told the truth about the restaurant's founding, will learn that the dishes they have been serving, the ones the current owners claim were created by celebrity chef Marcus Fontaine, are actually recipes from a 79-year-old black woman who learned to cook in a kitchen smaller than Brittany Ashford Wells' closet. In 4 days, everything changes. But Maya is not supposed to reveal herself. She is not supposed to intervene. She is supposed to observe, report back to her grandmother, help prepare for the transition. Quiet, invisible, the way the world expects her to be. Brittany Ashford Wells has other plans. The elderly server's name is Dolores Martinez. She has worked at La Maison Dorée for 31 years. She started when she was 42, fresh from Guatemala, barely speaking English, and the previous owners took a chance on her because Josephine Coleman's original hiring philosophy, even after she sold the restaurant, had left a legacy, a culture of giving chances to people the world overlooked. Dolores learned to speak English in this restaurant. She raised 4 children on the tips she earned here. She sent 2 of them to college, and one of them became a teacher, and that teacher's student won a state science championship last year, and the connection between 3 drops of water on a tablecloth and the kind of person Brittany Ashford Wells thinks she is becomes very clear when you follow the threads that link us all together. The threads that people like Brittany are too busy counting their money to notice. Dolores is apologizing. She is apologizing for the water, for breathing, for existing, for having the audacity to be 63 years old and still needing to work, because Social Security does not cover rent and medication and the small luxuries that make a life worth living. She is apologizing in the way that people who have been told their entire lives that they are less than learn to apologize, which is to say completely, thoroughly, with every fiber of their being committed to making the other person feel powerful, because that is the only currency they have. Maya watches this. Maya feels the heat rising in her chest, the same heat that made her grandmother throw a pot of boiling water at a man who called her a slur in her own kitchen in 1964, the same heat that made her mother refuse to leave the hospital waiting room for 17 hours straight until someone finally agreed to run the test that would have saved her life if they had run it 6 months earlier. The Coleman women have this heat. They have learned, generation after generation, to contain it, to channel it, to wait for the moment when it can do the most good instead of simply burning everything down. But sometimes, the moment comes faster than expected. Brittany is not finished. Brittany will never be finished because being finished would require her to have somewhere else to direct her anger, somewhere else to put the rage that comes from being born with everything and still feeling empty, still feeling like the world owes her something it refuses to name. "I want your manager," Brittany says, her voice carrying across the restaurant. "I want your manager. I want your name. I want your employee identification number, and I want you terminated before I leave this building. Do you understand me? Or is English not something they bothered to teach you wherever you came from?" The restaurant goes quieter than quiet. Well, and there is a particular silence that falls when cruelty shows its face in public. A silence made of shame and fear and the desperate hope that if we do not move, We will not be next. 37 people are frozen in their seats, forks halfway to mouths, conversations mid-sentence, because they all know that what they are witnessing is wrong, but they also know that Brittany Ashford Wells is the daughter of Marcus Ashford Wells, and Marcus Ashford Wells owns things, owns people, owns the very air in certain zip codes, and crossing his daughter is a calculation that most people in this room cannot afford to make. Maya sets down her teacup. The sound is small, almost inaudible, but in the silence, it carries. She reaches into her purse, not for a weapon, not for a phone, but for something far more dangerous in this moment. She reaches for a photograph. The photograph is laminated because her grandmother is practical like that, because Josephine Coleman learned a long time ago that the things that matter need to be protected from the elements, from time, from people who would destroy them if they could. Maya stands. She is 5 feet 4 inches tall, 118 pounds, wearing a second-hand dress and clearance shoes, and she is about to change the trajectory of several lives because someone has to, and she has been raised by a woman who never waited for someone else to do what needed to be done. The walk from table 8 to table 14 is approximately 27 steps. Maya counts them. She has learned to count things in moments of stress because her therapist taught her that. The therapist her grandmother pays for with money set aside from the catering business, the therapist who helped her process her mother's death and her anger and the particular exhaustion that comes from being young and black and brilliant in a world that wants her to be none of those things. 27 steps. She arrives. Excuse me. Maya's voice is not loud, but it cuts through the silence like her grandmother's knife through homemade bread, clean and precise, and leaving no room for argument. Brittany Ashford Wells turns, and her face performs the gymnastics of recalibration that always happens when people like her are confronted by people like Maya, the rapid assessment of threat level based on skin color, clothing, posture, the absence of obvious wealth markers, the presence of the quiet confidence that reads, bow to people like Brittany as either uppityness or mental illness, because in her world, poor black girls do not have the right to be confident. Excuse me, Maya says again, and she holds up the photograph. But before she can say what she came to say, before she can reveal the truth about this restaurant and its history, and the woman who built it with her bare hands, something happens that changes everything. Dolores Martinez makes a sound. It is not a word. It is not a scream. It is the particular gasp that medical professionals recognize immediately, the sound of a body betraying itself, of a heart deciding that after 63 years of faithful service, it has had enough. Dolores clutches her chest. Her face goes gray. She stumbles, reaching for the table for anything solid, and she misses, and she falls. And the sound of her body hitting the marble floor is the sound of Maya's mother falling in the hospital corridor 6 years ago, the sound that has echoed in Maya's nightmares ever since, the sound that sent her to the library to read every medical textbook she could find, because she swore on her mother's grave that she would never again stand by helpless while someone she cared about died. The restaurant erupts into chaos. Someone screams, someone drops a plate, someone shouts, "Call 911," and someone else fumbles for their phone, and Brittany Ashford Wells stands frozen with her mouth open because this was not part of the plan. This was not the story she was writing, and she does not know how to be powerful in a situation where her money cannot buy an immediate solution. Maya moves. Well, she moves the way her body has been trained to move through 2 years of volunteer work at the free clinic on Saturdays, through the CPR certification she renewed last month, through the anatomy textbooks she reads for pleasure because her mother wanted to be a doctor, and now Maya will be a doctor for both of them. She drops to her knees beside Dolores. She checks for breath, for pulse. She finds neither. She begins chest compressions, counting in her head, because that is what you do. That is what the training says. You count and you push, and you do not stop until someone makes you stop, or the person starts breathing again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. The counting becomes a rhythm. The rhythm becomes a prayer. Is anyone here a doctor? Someone shouts and no one answers. Because it is 11:30 on a Sunday morning, and the doctors who eat at La Maison Dorée are at home with their families or on golf courses or anywhere but here. And Maya is 17 years old, and she is the only thing standing between Dolores Martinez and death. She does not stop. Her arms burn. Her back screams. Sweat drips down her face, and she does not stop because she cannot stop, because she made a promise, because her grandmother lost this restaurant to pay for a treatment that did not come in time, and Maya will not let history repeat itself. Not here, not now, not while she has breath in her own body. Someone else drops beside her, a man in a white shirt, a waiter. She recognizes him from her observations. His name is James, and he has been here for 12 years, and he once brought Maya's grandmother a bouquet of flowers on the anniversary of her daughter's death, even though he did not know the whole story, even though he just knew that Josephine Coleman was a regular at the catering supply store where he did his second job, even though he is just a person who pays attention to other people, because that is the kind of person he is. "I know CPR," he says, and Maya nods, and they trade off. Two strangers united by training and desperation, and the refusal to let someone die on a restaurant floor on a Sunday morning. The paramedics arrive in 8 minutes. 8 minutes that feel like 8 hours. 8 minutes of pushing and counting and praying in languages that Maya does not speak, but somehow understands. 8 minutes of watching Brittany Ashford Wells stand frozen against the wall with her Birkin bag still clutched to her chest, like a shield against mortality. The paramedics take over. They have a defibrillator. They use it. Once. Twice. The third time, Dolores' chest heaves, and she gasps. And she is not dead. She is not dead. And Maya's arms finally stop moving, because the adrenaline has run out, and there is nothing left, except the shaking. The terrible, full-body shaking that comes after you have held someone's life in your hands and managed not to drop it. Dolores is loaded onto a stretcher. The paramedics are talking, something about transport time and cardiac units and who should ride along. And Maya is trying to stand, trying to find her legs, when she hears a voice that makes her blood run cold. Someone needs to sue that girl. Your Brittany Ashford Wells has found her voice again. Brittany Ashford Wells is pointing at Maya with the same manicured finger she used to point at Dolores. She could have killed her with that amateur CPR. She could have broken her ribs. Someone needs to get her name and call the police, because this is exactly the kind of vigilante behavior that my father's foundation has been warning about. Untrained people interfering in medical situations, probably looking for a lawsuit, probably hoping to get money from the restaurant for saving someone's life. Well, I am not going to let that happen. Do you hear me? I am going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. Maya stares at her. Maya stares at this woman who is standing in a restaurant built by Maya's grandmother, complaining about Maya saving the life of a woman who has worked here for 31 years. And something in Maya shifts, something fundamental, something that has been waiting to shift since she was 11 years old, and watching her mother die, and learning that the world is not fair, but that sometimes, you get the chance to make it a little bit fairer. The photograph is still in Maya's hand. She does not remember picking it up, but there it is, laminated and protected. Her grandmother's face smiling up at her from 1962. And Maya thinks about what her grandmother would do, what her grandmother has always done, what the Coleman women have done for generations when confronted with people who believe that money and power give them the right to harm. She straightens her spine. She wipes the sweat from her face, and she speaks. "My name is Maya Coleman. I am 17 years old. I am a junior at Westbrook High School. I am certified in CPR and first aid through the American Red Cross, certification number 4471-B, renewed on January 15th of this year. What I just did is called cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and it is exactly what the American Heart Association recommends for a victim of sudden cardiac arrest. The fact that you do not know this suggests that you have never bothered to learn how to save a life, which is consistent with everything else I have observed about you in the last 45 minutes. The restaurant has gone silent again, but it is a different silence now, the silence of people witnessing something they will tell their children about, the silence of history being made in a space that was built for exactly this kind of moment. Maya holds up the photograph. This is my grandmother. Her name is Josephine Coleman. She opened this restaurant on October 15th, 1962, with your great-grandmother, Eleanor Ashford, as her silent partner. Your great-grandmother provided the capital and the name on the lease. My grandmother provided the recipes, the vision, and the 37 years of labor that made this restaurant what it is. The menu you ate from tonight was designed by my grandmother. The sauce on your steak was her recipe. The bread in your basket was baked according to her instructions. Instructions that your father's kitchen staff found in a notebook that should have been returned to her when she sold this restaurant in 1987 to pay for my mother's cancer treatment. The treatment did not work. My mother died anyway. And my grandmother has spent the last 36 years watching the restaurant she built be stripped of its history, its identity, its truth. Brittany Ashford Wells' mouth opens. Nothing comes out. Maya continues. In 4 days, the legal transfer will be complete. My grandmother will once again own La Maison Dorée. I am here today because I was supposed to observe, to take notes, to help prepare for the transition. I was not supposed to reveal myself. I was not supposed to intervene, but I watched you scream at a 63-year-old woman for spilling 3 drops of water. I watched you threaten her job, her dignity, her right to exist in a space that was built on the principle that everyone belongs, that no one is less than, that a restaurant can be a place where the world we want to live in becomes real for the length of a meal. My grandmother was firebombed for that principle. She has scars on her hands from pulling burning photographs out of the flames, photographs of her family, her history, the people who came before her and made her possible. She sold her dream to save her daughter, and her daughter died anyway. And she never complained, she never asked for pity, she just kept going because that is what she taught me to do. Maya takes a step forward. Brittany takes a step back. The woman on that stretcher, Maya says, is named Dolores Martinez. She has worked here for 31 years. She taught herself English in this building. She raised 4 children on what she earned here. One of those children became a teacher, and that teacher's student won a state science championship last year. And that student is going to MIT in the fall, because Dolores Martinez stayed late after her shifts to help him study, because that is the kind of person she is. Because my grandmother's restaurant was built on the principle that we take care of each other. You called her trash. You asked if English was something they bothered to teach her wherever she came from. You were going to end her career because of 3 drops of water. 3 drops. The whole restaurant can hear Maya now. Phones are out, recording, because that is what phones do in moments like this. They capture and they broadcast, and they make sure that what happens in one room echoes into 1,000, 1,000,000 more rooms than anyone can count. Maya's voice does not waver. In 4 days, when my grandmother takes back her restaurant, Dolores Martinez will still have a job. She will have health insurance that covers cardiac rehabilitation. She will have paid time off to recover. She will have everything she has earned in 31 years of service, because that is what she deserves. You, Brittany Ashford Wells, will not be welcome here. Your father will not be welcome here. Your family's money will not be welcome here. Not because we hate you, not because we want revenge, but because a restaurant has to stand for something, and the thing my grandmother's restaurant stands for is the exact opposite of everything you just demonstrated. Brittany's face has gone through several colors now, white to red to something approaching purple. She is looking around, looking for allies, for support, for anyone who will validate the worldview she has carried since birth, the worldview that says money equals worth, that appearance equals value, that the person who yells loudest wins. She finds no allies. The other diners are looking at their plates, their phones, anywhere but at her. The staff are frozen, caught between their training and their humanity. The manager, who had been approaching to diffuse the situation before it escalated, has stopped mid-stride because this is not a situation that can be diffused. This is a situation that has to play out until it reaches its natural conclusion. Do you know who my father is? Brittany's voice cracks on the question. It is not a threat. It is a genuine question, a cry for help, the only tool she has ever been given to navigate the world. Maya nods. Your father is Marcus Ashford Wells. He is worth $2.3 billion. He founded Ashford Capital Partners in 1994. He purchased this restaurant in 2019 for $12 million. He removed every photograph of my grandmother and his own grandmother from the walls and replaced them with generic European landscapes because he did not want anyone to know that his fortune was built on a partnership between a black woman and his grandmother, a partnership that was erased from your family's history before you were born. I know exactly who your father is. The question is whether you do. Brittany opens her mouth, closes it, opens it again. What is she supposed to say? What can she say? The script she was given does not include this scene, this moment, this 17-year-old girl in a second-hand dress, speaking truths that no amount of money can contradict. Maya turns away from Brittany. She walks to the manager, a man named Christopher, who has been with the restaurant for 8 years and who will, in 4 days, learn that his job is secure and that his new boss is a 79-year-old woman who knows more about running a restaurant than he will ever learn from business school. Mrs. Martinez, Maya says, is going to Metropolitan General. I am going to follow the ambulance. Please make sure someone records this incident for the files. Include the names of all witnesses. My grandmother's lawyers will want complete documentation. Christopher nods because there is nothing else to do, because this 17-year-old girl has just taken control of a situation that should have been far beyond her, and there is something in her eyes, something ancient and fierce and patient, that makes him understand he is witnessing the passing of a torch. Maya starts walking toward the door. She is halfway there when she hears Brittany's voice again, softer now, stripped of its earlier arrogance. Wait. Maya stops. She does not turn around. I did not know. Brittany's voice breaks. I did not know any of that. About the restaurant, about the history, about any of it. My father never told me. My mother never told me. I just thought. Maya turns. Brittany is crying. The makeup that probably costs more than Maya's monthly grocery budget is running down her face in black streaks. She looks younger now, smaller, like the armor of wealth and privilege has cracked and left something vulnerable underneath. I thought this was just a restaurant, Brittany whispers. I thought she was just a waitress. I thought I mattered more than her because I have more money. That is what they taught me. But that is what everyone taught me. I did not know it was a lie. Maya walks back. 3 steps, 4, 5. She stops in front of Brittany, close enough to see the fear in her eyes, the dawning horror of a worldview collapsing in real time. I believe you, Maya says. I believe you did not know. I believe no one taught you better. That is the tragedy. Not that you are cruel, but that you were raised to be cruel, that no one ever told you there was another way to be powerful. My grandmother had nothing when she opened this restaurant. Nothing except her recipes and her vision, and a white woman who believed in her enough to risk her own family's disapproval. They built something together. They built a place where everyone belonged, where being kind was more important than being rich. From where the food was good because it was made with love instead of profit margins. That is real power. That is the only power that matters. What you have is not power. It is fear dressed up in expensive clothes. You scream at waitresses because you are terrified that if you stop screaming, someone will realize you have nothing else to offer. That is not power. That is prison. Brittany is shaking now, full-body tremors that have nothing to do with temperature. She looks at her hands like she has never seen them before, these hands that have held so much and gripped nothing, that have taken and never learned to give. How do you know? Brittany whispers. How do you know all of this? Because my grandmother told me. Because she spent her whole life building something instead of destroying, creating instead of consuming, loving instead of fearing. She told me the secret, the one thing that everyone with money and power is afraid to learn. You ready? Brittany nods. It is the first genuine gesture Maya has seen from her. The secret, Maya says, is that kindness is harder than cruelty. Cruelty is easy. Cruelty requires nothing but the willingness to hurt. Kindness requires strength. It requires looking at someone who has less than you and recognizing that they are not less than you. It requires giving up the illusion of superiority. It requires admitting that you might be wrong. That is why people with money choose cruelty. Not because they are evil, because they are scared. Because kindness would require them to change, and change is the scariest thing in the world for people who have spent their whole lives being told they are already perfect. Maya reaches out and touches Brittany's arm, just for a moment, just long enough to make contact. You do not have to stay scared. You can choose differently. You can learn. My grandmother has been teaching people her whole life. Rich people, poor people, black people, white people. People who thought they had nothing to learn, and people who thought they had nothing to teach. She teaches anyone who wants to learn. If you want to learn, you can come back. In 4 days, when the restaurant is hers again, you can sit in the kitchen and watch her cook. You can learn where the food comes from and who makes it and why it matters. You can be different, if you want. Brittany stares at her. The crying has stopped, replaced by something Maya cannot quite name. Well, something that might be the first stirring of actual thought in a mind that has been trained not to think. Why would you do that? Why would you offer that? After what I did, what I said. Maya smiles, and it is her grandmother's smile, the one Josephine learned in 1962 when people spat at her, and she smiled anyway, because smiling was resistance, because kindness was warfare, because the best revenge against people who hate you is to become so radiant with love that they cannot look directly at you without changing. Because my grandmother taught me that people are not fixed, we are always becoming, and who you become next is more important than who you were yesterday. Dolores will recover. I have to go now. I have to be at the hospital, but you have my offer, if you want it. Maya turns and walks toward the door. The crowd parts for her, not because they are afraid, but because there is something about her that demands space. Something that has been passed down through generations of women who refuse to make themselves small. At the door, she pauses. She turns back to face the room. All 37 people who witnessed this moment, all of them holding phones or forks or nothing at all, all of them frozen in the aftermath of something they do not yet have words for. To everyone who stayed silent, Maya says, her voice carrying to every corner, I understand. It is scary to speak up. It is risky. It could cost you things you cannot afford to lose. I am not here to judge you for your silence, but I want you to know something. Every time we stay silent, we teach people like her that cruelty works. Every time we look away, we become part of the architecture that allows people to be treated like trash because they have less money, less power, less protection. My grandmother did not stay silent. My mother did not stay silent. I will not stay silent. And if you want to be different, if you want to live in a world where kindness is stronger than cruelty, you have to practice. You have to speak up, even when it is scary, especially when it is scary. Because the only thing that has ever changed anything is ordinary people deciding they have had enough of the way things are. She looks at each person in turn, she sees them, she makes them feel seen, and then she leaves. The door closes behind her with a soft click, but in the silence of the restaurant, it sounds like thunder. Brittany Ashford Wells stands in the middle of the room, mascara streaked, hands shaking, surrounded by the debris of an identity that no longer fits. She looks at the table where she was sitting, at the water drops that have long since dried, at the empty space where Dolores was standing before her body betrayed her. She thinks about her father, who taught her that money was power. She thinks about her mother, who taught her that appearance was everything. She thinks about her grandmother, Eleanor Ashford, whose name she learned today for the first time, whose face she has never seen, whose legacy was erased because it was inconvenient, because partnership with a black woman did not fit the story the Ashford family wanted to tell. She thinks about who she wants to become. The manager approaches her. He is professional, neutral, his face revealing nothing. Ms. Ashford Wells, he says, I think it would be best if you left now. Des Brittany nods. She does not argue. She does not threaten. She reaches into her Birkin bag, pulls out a stack of $100 bills, and places them on the table. For Mrs. Martinez, she says, for her medical bills. It is not enough. I know it is not enough. But it is what I have right now. She walks toward the door, smaller than before, diminished by something other than height or weight, and she pauses at the threshold the way Maya paused, but she does not turn around, does not address the crowd because she has not earned that yet, has not become the kind of person who can speak to crowds and make them listen. She leaves. The door closes, and 37 people sit in the aftermath, their meals growing cold, their conversations extinct, each of them wondering what they would have done, what they will do next time. Oh, what kind of person they want to become when they walk out that door and rejoin the world that made this moment possible. 3 days later, Maya stands in the hospital room where Dolores Martinez is recovering from what the doctors are calling a relatively minor cardiac event, which is a phrase that sounds absurd when you remember that her heart stopped beating for 47 seconds on a restaurant floor. Dolores is sitting up, eating Jell-O, complaining about the hospital food in a way that makes Maya laugh because it is so perfectly Dolores, so exactly the woman who held her hand at her mother's funeral and told her that grief was not a monster, but a teacher, that if she listened to it carefully enough, it would show her what mattered. The girl who saved me, Dolores says, And her voice carries an accent that has been softened by 31 years in this country, but never erased. The accent that Brittany mocked. The accent that is the sound of survival, of adaptation, of a life rebuilt in a foreign language. I did not know you were Josephine's granddaughter. I did not know there was a granddaughter. Maya nods. She kept me secret. She was protecting me from people like... She does not finish the sentence. She does not need to. Dolores nods, like the Ashford girl. Yes, I heard about what happened after I left. The nurses told me. One of them recorded it. She showed me. You spoke beautifully, Mija. Your grandmother would be proud. Maya feels the tears threatening and fights them back because she has work to do. Because in 24 hours, the legal transfer will be complete and there is so much to prepare. So many decisions to make, so many futures to protect. She cannot afford to cry. But Dolores reaches out and takes her hand, the way she did 6 years ago at the funeral, and the permission in that touch is enough, and Maya cries, not from sadness, but from relief, from the release of a tension she has been carrying since she was 11 years old, and learned that love is not enough to save anyone. I was so scared, Maya whispers. When you fell, I thought I was going to lose you. I thought I was going to watch someone else die because I could not do enough. You did enough, Dolores says. You did exactly enough. The doctors say if you had not started CPR immediately, I would be dead. My heart stopped for 47 seconds. That is a long time, long enough for things to go very wrong, but you counted. You pushed. You did not stop. But that is what saved me. Not magic, not miracles. Just a girl who learned how to help and then helped. Maya squeezes Dolores's hand. My grandmother is coming tomorrow. The papers are being signed at 3 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, La Maison Dorée will be hers again. Dolores's eyes go wide. She told me. She called me this morning. I did not believe it at first. I thought the pain medication was making me hear things. But it is true? Maya nods. It is true. And when you are well enough to work again, you will have a job. A real job, with health insurance and paid time off, and all the things you should have had from the beginning. You will never be threatened with termination for spilling water. You will never be screamed at by customers who think their money makes them gods. You will be safe. Dolores starts crying now. Woody soft tears that streak down her weathered face and land on the hospital gown. In 31 years, she says, no one has ever promised me safe. Maya leans forward and wraps her arms around this woman, this stranger who is not a stranger, this link in a chain that stretches back generations and forward into futures none of them can see. It is not a promise, Maya says. It is a guarantee. The next day, Maya stands in the office of Harrison and Associates, watching her grandmother sign papers that have been 62 years in the making. Josephine Coleman is 79 years old. Her hands shake now, not from nerves, but from age, from the accumulated weight of decades, from scars that never fully healed. But her signature is clear, her initials are precise. Her name, her full name, Josephine Eleanor Coleman, where is written on a contract that returns to her what should never have been taken. The lawyer, a young woman named Sarah Harrison, who is the granddaughter of the man who drew up the original contract in 1962, explains the terms. The property transfer is complete. The license is restored. The trademark is protected. The recipes, the ones that the current ownership claims were created by celebrity chef Marcus Fontaine, are now legally documented as the intellectual property of Josephine Coleman, with full royalty rights for past usage. The amount, when calculated, is substantial, enough to renovate the restaurant, enough to hire new staff at living wages, enough to create a scholarship fund for culinary students from underrepresented backgrounds, enough to fund Maya's medical school if she wants it. Though Josephine would never make that decision for her granddaughter, never tell her what to become, only what she already is. Maya watches her grandmother sign the last document. She watches the pen lift from the paper. She watches Sarah Harrison stamp and witness and notarize, and then it is done, and Josephine Coleman owns La Maison Dorée again. And somewhere across town, Marcus Ashford Wells is receiving a phone call that will ruin his afternoon and possibly his fiscal quarter. Grandma, Maya says. Yes, baby. What happens now? Josephine looks at her granddaughter, at this girl who saved a woman's life and challenged a billionaire's daughter and carried the weight of generations without breaking, And she smiles the smile she learned in 1962, the one that is resistance and warfare and love all at once. Now, Josephine says, "Shall we go to work?" The reopening of La Maison Dorée under its original ownership makes local news, then regional news, then national news when someone finds the video of Maya confronting Brittany, and it goes viral in the way that things go viral now, spreading like fire across platforms and time zones, viewed 47 million times in the first 72 hours. The story has everything: a black teenager saving a life, a billionaire's daughter being humbled, a 79-year-old woman reclaiming her legacy, a partnership between black and white women erased from history and finally restored. It has villains and heroes, and a twist that screenwriters would reject for being too convenient, except that it is true, all of it is true, documented in contracts and photographs, and the 47 seconds of a stopped heart that beat again. The calls start coming. Publishers, producers, podcast hosts. Everyone wants the story, everyone wants the moment, everyone wants to package this particular piece of hope and sell it to an audience that is hungry for evidence that the world can be different. Josephine says no to most of them. She is 79. She is tired. She has spent her whole life telling this story through food, through service, through the quiet dignity of showing up every day and making something good, and she does not need cameras to validate what she has always known. But she says yes to one interview, one conversation, one chance to speak directly to the people who have been watching and sharing and wondering what it all means. Maya sits beside her grandmother on the morning the interview airs. They are in the apartment above the dry cleaners, the same apartment where Josephine has lived for 36 years, the same apartment where Maya's mother took her last breath, and Maya made her first promise, and the story that led to this moment took its first tentative steps. The interviewer asks the obvious questions: the history, the recipes, the photograph, the legal battle. Josephine answers them all with the patience of a woman who has been answering questions her whole life, who has learned that the truth does not need embellishment, only repetition. And then the interviewer asks the question Maya has been waiting for. "Mrs. Coleman, what do you want people to take from this story?" Josephine is quiet for a moment. She looks at Maya. She looks at the photograph that started everything, the one that is no longer laminated because it is framed now, hanging on the wall where everyone can see it. "I want them to know," Josephine says, "that kindness is work. It is daily work. It is showing up even when you are tired, even when the world tells you that cruelty is easier, even when the people with money and power make it very clear that they do not think you belong. It is raising children who will carry it forward. It is teaching grandchildren who will carry it further. It is believing, even when the evidence suggests otherwise, that people can change, that hearts can open, that the story is not over until you decide to stop writing." Maya watches her grandmother speak, and she thinks about Brittany Ashford Wells, who called the restaurant 2 weeks after the incident and asked if she could watch Josephine cook. Maya thinks about Brittany in the kitchen, awkward and out of place. She is wearing an apron for the first time in her life, learning to chop onions without crying by breathing through her mouth the way Dolores taught her. Maya thinks about the check Brittany wrote, the one that paid for Dolores's entire hospital stay, the one that was not enough, but was a start, a beginning, a first step on a road that would take years to walk. Maya thinks about her mother, who wanted to be a doctor and did not get the chance. She thinks about the application sitting on her desk, the one for the 7-year medical program that starts in the fall. She thinks about the future she is building, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of kindness at a time. The interviewer asks one final question. "Maya, what is next for you?" Maya looks at the camera, at the millions of faces she cannot see, at the world that is watching and waiting and wondering what comes next. "What is next," Maya says, "is everything. Medical school, running the restaurant with my grandmother, teaching the next generation what we taught the current one, making sure that 62 years from now, someone else is sitting where I'm sitting, telling a story about a 17-year-old girl who refused to be invisible, who learned that kindness was harder than cruelty and chose it anyway, who built something that outlived her. That is what is next." She pauses. She thinks about her mother. She thinks about her grandmother. She thinks about Dolores and Brittany and the paramedics, and the 37 people in the restaurant, and the 47 million people who watch the video, and the countless people who will never watch it. but will be touched by it anyway. Because that is how stories work. They ripple outward in ways we can never fully trace. And if you are watching this, Maya says, and you think this is someone else's story, that you could never do what I did, that you are too ordinary, too scared, too small, I want you to know something. My grandmother was ordinary once. She was scared once. She was small once. She still built something extraordinary. Not because she was special, but because she was stubborn. Because she refused to accept the story the world told about her. Because she wrote her own story one day at a time, one meal at a time, one act of kindness at a time. You can do that too. You can start right now. It does not have to be dramatic. It does not have to be viral. It just has to be real. One choice, one moment, one time when you see cruelty happening and you decide, even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, even if everything in you wants to stay silent and safe, that you are going to speak. That is all it takes. One person, one moment, one choice. The rest takes care of itself. Maya's grandmother reaches over and takes her hand, the way Dolores took it in the hospital, the way Maya's mother took it in her final moments, the chain unbroken, the story continuing. The camera holds on their hands for a moment. 2 shades of brown, 2 generations, 2 halves of a whole that will never be complete and does not need to be. And then the interview ends. But the story does not. The story never ends. It passes from hand to hand, from generation to generation, from one act of kindness to the next, forever becoming, forever incomplete, forever reaching toward a world that does not exist yet, but could, if enough of us decide to build it. Have you ever watched someone be treated like they do not matter and stayed silent because speaking up felt too risky? Have you ever judged someone by their appearance, their clothes, their accent, their poverty, before you learned their story? Have you ever been the person being judged, standing where Dolores stood, where Maya's grandmother stood in 1962, where so many people stand every single day? If you are still watching, if you made it this far, if something in this story touched something in you, the invitation is open. The kitchen is waiting. The story is being written right now, in this moment, in the choices you make in the next hour, the next day, the next year. What will you write? The camera fades. The screen goes dark. And somewhere, in a restaurant that has belonged to the same family for 3 generations, a 79-year-old woman is teaching a 24-year-old billionaire's daughter how to knead bread, how to listen, how to start over. Both of them are crying. Both of them are laughing. And the future, which once seemed so fixed, so determined, so inevitable, stretches out before them like a road with no end, waiting to be walked.